Welcome to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private.
Hello again. Welcome back to another episode of the Recovery Cast, proudly brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private. My name's Oliver and I'm a former addict in recovery, and we have a huge episode planned for you today. We have a topic that is quite interesting and I'm going to delve into it and how it affects me. But first, I'm going to do our little spiel, our little disclaimer, and a bit of information about what we are here to talk about on the Recovery Cast. The Recovery Cast is a podcast created by people in recovery from addiction for people in recovery from addiction. There are many definitions of addiction, but we keep it simple. Addiction to us is when people use alcohol, drugs, or certain behaviours repetitively to their detriment. Basically, when it's a problem for them and their families. Therefore, an addict is not necessarily a needle-using junkie in a dark laneway, and an alcoholic is not necessarily a homeless man in a park. Recovery for us means using an active daily process or program to deal with alcohol use disorder, substance use disorder, or other behavioural addictions. People in recovery are committed to complete abstinence. This daily process is as important to being able to live normal lives as daily dialysis is for people with kidney problems. This podcast is meant as a support tool for those in recovery. I myself am a recovering drug addict. However, each day we're going to focus on a different perspective of recovery. Everyone who participates in this podcast is in an active recovery program. We are not affiliated with any one recovery methodology, however, and we're going to focus on a variety of different types of recovery, including 12-step recovery, otherwise known as AA and NA, SMART recovery, Celebrate recovery, Dharma recovery, cognitive behavioural therapy, and more. And a quick disclaimer, this podcast is intended to be informative. A podcast alone can't support your sobriety and your recovery, so we suggest it should only be one component of a daily recovery routine. For more information on recovery and all this sort of stuff I've just spoken about, please go to www.rehab.melbourne. All right, now on with the show. So today we're going to do the 27th of October, and we are up to an AA Daily Reflections reading, which is the Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program's daily reading, which can be applied to any kind of addictive behaviour, to be honest. I get a lot out of this, and that wasn't, alcohol particularly wasn't the substance that I had, a problem with. Of course I did, but there were others, and I think with all these sort of particular fellowships where they say that they're only concerned with one thing, whether it be drugs, alcohol, or anything. There's lots of different 12-step fellowships like Cocaine Anonymous. There's a lot. For me, I just cross out whatever they're talking about and just say addiction, because it helps to, all of these readings are good for anyone. So today's reading is the 27th of October, which is called Global Sharing. And it goes like this. The only thing that matters is that he is an alcoholic who has found a key to sobriety. These legacies of suffering and of recovery are easily passed among alcoholics one to the other. This is our gift from God, and it is bestowal upon others like us is the one aim that today animates AAs all around the globe. 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, page 151. The strength of Alcoholics Anonymous lies in the desire of each member and of each group around the world to share with other alcoholics their suffering and the steps taken to gain and maintain recovery. By keeping a conscious contact with my higher power, I make sure that I always nurture my desire to help other alcoholics, thus ensuring the continuity of the wonderful fraternity of Alcoholics Anonymous. So there's a lot of AA specific stuff going on there. You know, there's things like fraternity, which suggests that it's male dominated, and you know, there's higher power stuff, and it can be quite exclusive and AA specific. However, I'm going to just sort of address this reading from a broader standpoint, and I'm going to talk about it. It says the strength lies in the desire of each member and each group around the world to share and help other people who are suffering, and they're sharing the steps that they took to gain and maintain recovery. That is so crucial, and that's really, really powerful stuff. I certainly have made my life in recovery all about helping other people, and it gets me out of myself and out of my head. And even just in the act of making this podcast for you today, you know, I'm imagining, and I get this feeling that there are people listening to this, and I hope that they take something away from it and it helps them through their day today. That's just one small thing that I can do. So we'll talk a little bit about the strength of each member and sharing their recovery. I heard a story from an acquaintance, a friend really, recently, who said that they got into an Uber and their Uber driver could tell, and this was when the person was in active addiction, so they were, you know, probably intoxicated or affected somehow, and the Uber driver could tell that they must have just given off some kind of energy of how kind of miserable they must have been feeling. And this Uber driver picked up on it and then started telling their story about, oh, well, I am in recovery and I'm living this amazing life. And if you want to do that, or if you feel like you need help, then, you know, I've walked this path and I've done all these different things to arrive in this place where I'm able to drive this Uber and live a really like joyous and wonderful, happy, free life. And now, you know, I heard this story told to me, not by the Uber driver, but by the passenger who is now clean and in recovery and starting their journey in recovery. That's the ultimate kind of, it's such a coincidence. Imagine that you could have gotten into any Uber, but you just so happen to get into an Uber with a driver who's in recovery. I mean, and not only that, but they stayed in touch, and the passenger, you know, stayed in touch and was able to receive treatment, you know, from the advice of this Uber driver. I mean, it's unbelievable how that happens, and it's very powerful. People who are in recovery understand it, at least in my perspective, they understand because they've walked that road more than, say, a psychologist or a psychiatrist who hasn't had that lived experience can. You know, they can understand it from a textbook sort of academic, scientific aspect, but it's very different to someone who's actually walked that path and lived that life and has got the experience of their recovery themselves. That's certainly what I feel, is that in my life today, people in recovery just get it, and people who aren't don't get it. That's what I feel like when I speak to people in recovery. I feel like I'm part of this. You know, I'm not going to say cult because that's so funny, but I'm going to say it's like a secret society. You know, that somehow we are. We're all intrinsically linked by our experience of having addiction, you know, and being in recovery. And it's truly, truly special and wonderful that we get to share that together and help each other. Now, I'm going to talk about now what that's actually like about. I've said that people in recovery get it, and I'm going to talk about my friendships and relationships today, and how when I was getting into recovery, what happened to the friendships that were centered around my active addiction, and how I've managed to negotiate that sort of transition in my life. We're going to talk about this a little more after the break.
You're listening to the Recovery Cast by Hills and Rangers Private. Now playing daily on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. For more shows, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.
That's right. So now, we're going to go back into talking about what actually happened to my old friendships. When I was in active addiction, I had a heap of friends. A lot of them weren't other people who were suffering from addiction. A lot of them were just normal people that were able to go out and have a drink, or it wasn't affecting their lives. And I was just this one person in the group that would always go the hardest and always want more and be manipulative and selfish, and I also had friends that were also focused like me on furthering my addiction. People that I would hang out with because I knew that they had what I wanted. I knew they had money. I knew they had something that I wanted, whether it be drugs or alcohol or anything that I could go and spend time with them. And they were very much in the same mindset of that they wanted to be friends with me because they knew that it was the same thing. They were in the same boat. And after I got out of rehab, or in fact while I was in rehab, I went through my phone and I deleted a lot of phone numbers. And I think when I went into rehab and when I was accepting treatment, I was that broken that I was willing to do whatever it took. And that's where that came in, was just one of the things that I was actually willing to do. I was willing to go to any lengths to get better and recover and be in recovery and stay in recovery. So I deleted all the numbers. I deleted my Facebook. And what happened in the months and years since I've been in recovery is that the people who weren't suffering from addiction that I was friends with have continued their lives, and I've just felt like since I've come into recovery that they actually haven't understood and weren't able to understand the profundity and just sheer enormity of what I achieved by getting clean. And I felt like they weren't able to appreciate how much hard work I did and how much change that I went through. And it felt like they actually didn't know me anymore. And I could think about this incredibly in a very sad way, because these were friends that some of whom that I'd had for a few years, quite a long time, that all of a sudden I've come out of treatment and it felt like to them I was a stranger. And I almost felt like to my old self I was a stranger as well, because I've just become this totally different new person. I'd transformed from, this disgusting, grubby little caterpillar into a butterfly. I don't know. That really was what it felt like. And what I did was, through my pursuit of recovery, I developed new hobbies and I got slowly into a different career, and I've made friends, and I've made friends with people in recovery through the 12-step fellowship that I choose to be a member of. And this change has just slowly come about over a long period of time, and it didn't happen overnight, but I had to let go of those old friendships in order to continue my recovery. And they're all still out there, and I still sometimes, keep in touch. It's a bit of a hope you're well kind of thing, But I stick with this strength today. I choose to spend my time and my effort and my life alongside people who are also committed to that journey of staying in recovery. And maybe even I've got old friends who are not in recovery, and they're just normal people that don't have addiction problems. And I stick with them too because they're true old friends, and they're not in addiction, is that they are normal and they understand me to such a deeper level than just the superficial of what the friends that I had to let go of did. They knew me, and when I got clean, they actually saw me going back to the old Oliver that they would have known, from years and years before. And the first time I caught up with a friend after I got out of rehab, this is a friend that I used to go over to his house and pass out on his couch, and I would go over there and I would use and I wouldn't be very good to be around at all. And, really the reason I wanted to be there was just because I wasn't being held accountable for my actions, is that he didn't really say anything. He didn't say, "What are you doing? Like, you're not fun to be around," like my family and some of my friends were like. And I hung out with him in recovery for the first time, and I said, am I better to hang around with? He's a friend of mine who is, he really enjoys working on cars, and that's my new hobby in recovery. I love working on cars. And I said, am I better to work on cars with? And he said, absolutely you are. It was a complete change. And, I stuck with him because I knew him from before when I was in active addiction, but now, I stick with the strength. I stick with people who help further my recovery and understand why I'm in recovery. And it just makes it easier to stay in recovery. I think if I was going to give advice to people who are in that period of transition, from what I talked about in another episode of jumping over that wall onto the other side of a life of recovery, I would recommend doing exactly that and just curate that friends list. When one door closes, another opens. And I had to keep myself safe, and I think that's so important, is that in those really early recovery kind of times, it's important to keep yourself safe. That's why we go into treatment, is because we need to be in a safe place to treat our addiction first off, and then we learn how to live a normal life through what we learn there and the habits and routine that we develop, and leave and continue. That's how I did it. In the next couple of episodes, we are going to be hearing from a family member of my family you guys are going to hear firsthand what it was like to live with Oliver, who was in active addiction, what I was like, what my behaviour was like, and how the interventions were staged and what it was all like going into treatment at the recommendation of my family. And we're going to talk about what those of you who are family members of a loved one who is suffering from addiction, what can you do? That's going to be another episode coming up, and I really look forward to sharing that with you. But in the meantime, I think that you guys should stick with those people who are in recovery and listen and get the strength off them, of the people who have walked this path before. All of the staff at Hills and Ranges Private are in recovery, and they have their own lived experience. So if you would like to get in touch with them, you can do so. There's a contact us section on the Hills and Ranges Private website, which is, you can reach it at www.rehab.melbourne. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and just take a moment to be grateful for it. It's springtime in Melbourne. We're all going to be out of lockdown hopefully soon. So do one thing today. Give someone a call who you know that you trust and will help you. Have a chat with them. Have a lovely day. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Recovery Cast. For more, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.